So you might be running applications or workloads in the cloud, and you're probably thinking, how do I understand or ultimately improve my security posture in the cloud? And I often think the same thing. Well, one thing that you can do as a go-to is head over to Azure Security Center. The free tier gives you a wealth of information about the resources which are running in Azure, and you can really start to understand what your security posture is. One thing that's really nice is that you get given a secure score for your subscription. So you get given a score that tells you whether you're performing well or you're maybe not performing so well. You can then dive into that score and see recommendations that you can make to improve your security posture overall. So if you really don't know where to start, head over to Azure Security Center, check out your secure score, and dive into the recommendations to start improving that posture today.
Hey, and welcome back to AzureFunBytes. My name is Jay Gordon. I think we've got another really cool opportunity to talk about another awesome subject. And what do we got this time? What we got is security. And so I think I gave you a little intro to the person who is going to talk about it, but I want to come and bring him right in. All right, so let's have our guest in today. It is none other than my coworker and someone I haven't seen on the road in a while, but a very, very cool guy, Dean Bryan. How are you, Dean?
I'm good, Jay. How are you?
You know, I'm trying, and I think that's the best way I can put it. I'm trying out here. It's a cool time to talk with people always about I don't know what's going on in technology and how they can do more with Azure. And so that's kind of what is going on. And that's why you're here to help me. So you've done a lot in the world of security, and it's something I'm super, super excited to hear about. You want to just give us like the big Dean intro for a sec?
All right, I'll give you a whirlwind tour. I'm Dean Bryan. Great to be on the show and chat security with all of the viewers and all your viewers here, Jay. They're all awesome. And I'm a cloud security advocate here at Microsoft, which means I focus on cloud and security, right? So helping people understand how to improve their security in the cloud. I focus on a number of things, general all-up cloud security. I do a bunch of work in the SecOps space, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And then a bunch of work in the serverless security space. I'm not sure if you've had a show on serverless yet, but
no, it's definitely in the works. It's something I'd like to spend some time on because it's another really, really useful technology that I think that I just need a little bit more under my belt. It's so important now.
Yeah, you know, it's been around for a little while now, and one of the things I realized was that when these technologies are new, it takes a little while for people to really think, oh, we need to start talking about security now, right? So serverless is kind of at that maturity stage now. Well, it's past that, where people are like, dang, like we're using this stuff in production. How do we secure it? And I did a bunch of work with serverless in previous roles, and kind of combined my two passions of serverless and security. And I've done a bit of work in that space, but we're not going to focus too much on that today, but just for the viewers, a bit of background on some of the stuff I'm working on.
Awesome. Well, that's great. And so one of my big questions is, how long have you been doing this? Like, when did you really get started? I mean, security is such getting into tech is such a huge challenge in itself. You know, how you find yourself here is one of the things that I really am always interested in. And so can you give me like the Dean gets to Microsoft story in about a minute?
It's been a long road. So long story, I never went to university or college, as you would call it over there in the States. I was an apprentice. They're kind of very popular in vocational careers like building and plumbing, but I managed to bag myself an apprenticeship in IT with British Telecom, and I did networking for a number of years, which evolved into managing firewalls and doing some old school on-premises security stuff. And somehow in 2012, I bagged myself some really cool jobs. I led cyber defense operations for the Olympics in 2012.
Wow.
And that was great fun. Like one of the coolest jobs I've ever done. And that's where I really kind of focused on pure security. I did a lot of networking and network security, but that was more of like an all over round kind of security role to kind of lead that team. And then Yeah, some stories over a beer to talk about those, I think. But but then kind of evolved from there. I joined. I started working in the cloud in 2013. I joined another orange-coloured cloud provider a few years after that, and then found myself here at Microsoft a few years ago, working in. I've done engineering, advocacy, evangelism, architecture, a bunch of stuff along the way.
Man, I always love hearing these stories. Like, it's always fun to hear how that journey begins and where you go. I know I've had a weird journey myself, and so it's just cool to hear. So one of the things we're going to talk about today, I think, is a great subject. It's security, because I believe from the start to the finish of anything you put on the internet, and especially in the cloud, it's got to be security minded first. And I really believe that. And so you have helped this show today kind of bring that a little bit more together. And so I want to share one of the big docs that I've put in the chat already so everybody can take a look. And I think this is kind of the great starting point, Dean, for really, for us to talk about. But it's the best security practice and patterns that you've all really identified here that working with Azure are the best practices. So I'd like to first question, like, what do you think we should just take a look at real fast? What do you think are the key things that we think as part of today we'll hit?
So I think we were chatting about this the other day, Jay, and like the security is such a vast topic, right? We could talk about identity, we could talk about AppSec, we can talk about encryption, we can talk about database security, we can talk about SecOps, security posture. Like, it's a whole industry, right? So we unfortunately we can't talk about all of that in the next hour. We'll completely blow everybody's mind. But
I can't get that much time in. You're right.
It's not going to work. So I think some of the stuff that a lot of people that are new to the cloud are focusing on things like network security, operational security, and kind of what people are a bit baffled about is they have this point. They know I really need to focus on security, right? And the cloud does a bunch of this stuff for us, right? With the shared responsibility model, where the vendor takes responsibility for a lot of the stack that we historically would have had to look after. So it's a kind of positive start in the cloud, but there's still some work that we need to do as users of the cloud and that our customers have to do. So I think some of the people moving into that cloud are doing infrastructure as a service, a lot of them. They're kind of moving virtual machines over. So network security is quite important. Virtual machine security is quite important. And as we saw in the intro video just there, the just general knowing where to start, right? There's all this information here, right? And you can go and read it all, and it's like taking a degree in cloud security, reading through all these docs we have, right? So I think the good thing is having somewhere to start. So for me, that somewhere to start in Azure is Azure Security Center, which is like a hub.
Sure. Let me see if I can bring that out. So Azure Security Center. What is Azure Security Center? That's
there we go.
So here's a doc I'm going to share with everybody. It's a really going to be a useful doc for what we're going to be talking about today, because it's really a great basis for a lot of information. I think it's just chock full of information, and the ability for you to kind of create policies that really help define what you're going to be able to do with your Azure account.
Yeah, it's exactly that, and it's kind of a place where it catches a lot of the low-hanging fruit, right? So if there's obvious stuff that you're doing wrong or things that you should be doing differently, then it's going to be the first thing that's going to identify you. And this is a really cool point here, actually, like rapidly changing workloads, right? Who was I watching the other day? I was watching a talk by somebody the other day, and they were talking about doing threat modeling. Right, so we do threat modeling. A lot of developers do this, right? They model their applications for threats, and they see what potential threat vectors and attack vectors they could be susceptible to. That works great in an old school environment, right? When nothing's changing very much, right? But we're sometimes doing DevOps. I know you've spoken about DevOps on the show and Agile, and we're shipping like fast and often and small incremental changes, right? You can't do a threat model for every line of code. You'd be mad. Like, it's impossible.
It would certainly take you some time, that's for sure.
Exactly. So what Security Center does is it's kind of continually checking these resources for us and seeing if they comply to our policies and standards and recommendations, so that we can keep on top of stuff that's ever evolving.
Sure. So one of the things that I want to take a look at today is what I guess I would call not great security. And so we'll take a look at an application that I've put together, and we'll see if it does exactly what we expect. All right.
Nice.
Which is show me that I've got bad security. And I think that that's one of the things I'd like to accomplish here. I just want to show that security ain't great for me right here, and somehow or another we'll look through it, and maybe on the other side of things, you'll help me kind of figure out what I'm not doing so well, and hopefully we'll make some cool decisions along the way. Does that sound cool?
Yeah, let's take a look.
All right, so I built myself a demo. Let's kind of reduce the scope of my stuff here. And here we go. I just built a random Kubernetes cluster in an ACR for a basic application that I built. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to drop into a Cloud Shell, and I'll just bring up the Kubernetes service. So we'll just do kube ctl show services. Oh, get, excuse me. And then what we'll do is we'll get what services are currently running on this cluster. So we've got a whole bunch of different services, as you can see. And what I want to do is just get the front end IP. And here we go. Got my front end IP address. And what I will show everybody, let me just switch between these, is we've got a really simple kind of demo shop that's on the background. And it's really cool. It's really useful to kind of use as a demo. It's by a competitor, so I'm not going to say their name, but it's a really useful demo. And I just wanted to use it as something to kind of get us where we got to go, because it only took me a few minutes to do. So what we're going to do is just go back and take a look at everything again. So let's just go back to our resource group. And so we've got this these two things. So I'm not even using this ACR. I just have a script that builds the two of them and connects to service principal. So it's just a habit. And then we'll take a look at the cluster. So it's a really, really basic cluster. Nothing, really nuts here that we're going to take a look at. And so what we can do is start taking a look at some of the things related to security. And right now, I've got 0 recommendations here. But what I can do, I guess, is modify Security Center to help kind of realize what I'm doing right or wrong. Am I right here?
Yeah, so this is actually a really cool point, actually. One thing that we have is like having this security tab in like some of our products. So if you're using some people are using Azure and they've already got a bunch of stuff in there, so they want this holistic view of everything, right? Other people, like in your scenario here, you've put something in Azure and you want to know what you should care about. So having this security option, I guess, in the menu is something that helps you understand the security of that specific resource or that specific service. So that's quite a nice feature, I think, for people to do that. But yeah, so it's probably because you don't have Security Center this isn't in your inventory, right? So the idea of this, your Security Center needs to make sure it has a list of stuff that it's managing, right? So if you go to the inventory option on the left there, you should be able to see the what resources are being covered, right? So there's a couple of unmonitored resources there. So you can filter this. I think it comes under agent monitoring or something like that. If you click on agent monitoring in the filters there, yeah, you can select unmonitored and see what stuff's unmonitored. Okay,
so this is for another.
This is for another project here, right? So
yeah.
For assets inside your environment that aren't monitored by Security Center right now, right? So it looks like your AKS probably is. Let Let's have a look. What does it say at the top there?
Okay.
Yeah, Azure Defender container registries. Yes. All right, cool. Yeah, so you have this enabled in security. You don't have any recommendations, right? So what you can do here is, I mean, you're probably not getting much traffic to your Kubernetes cluster here, but what we can do is I can show you an example of a Kubernetes cluster which is getting some traffic and is purposely like super vulnerable.
Okay.
If you want me to share my screen quick.
Yeah, that'd be great. Let me bump myself out, and why don't you pop yourself in?
There we go.
So we got a great big convoy here.
Yeah, there's a bunch of
stuff to look at.
This is an Azure Security Center demo environment, right? So you can see here that this is the dashboard we get with Security Center, like out of the box. But we can start looking at certain recommendations, and we can start seeing what recommendations we've got for our environment. But really, if we want to look at this for our Kubernetes environment, we can go into Azure Defender here, and we can see there's some security specific stuff here. So we've got container image scanning happening here. Like if you were using Azure Container Registry, you have a registry there, but you're not using it for your containers. You can actually go in here and see that regular scans are happening on your container registry. They're checking your images that you're checking in for your containers, and then they're telling you what's wrong. So we can look here and see that we can click into one of these specific security issues, right? So we can click into this here. It tells us the CVE ID, what the exact vulnerability is it patchable, right? It will tell you how to do remediation for this specific vulnerability on your container. It'll give you additional information, but most importantly to you, what it will tell you is it will tell you all of your vulnerable or affected resources in your account. So you can go along and apply this remediation to the affected resources. This just sprung out on me here, right? This isn't, you're doing something slightly different because you're not using registry. But while we're on the topic of containers, I thought it was worthwhile showing this. And this is great, right? We can look through and say, actually, we've got 295 vulnerabilities here. And I must warn to the viewers that this is a demo account, right? This is purposely vulnerable. You can see that we're running some vulnerable container images in here. They're sitting in a directory called vulnerables. But yeah, ultimately,
you wanna, do me a favor and just up the font size just one bit.
Well, let's see how good my something like that. Well, that's
great. Yeah. Thank you.
So you can see here the affected resources, right? We've got a bunch of vulnerable resources in here on purpose because this is a demo account. But you understand that we basically we can look at all these repositories. We can click into this specific resource as well. And then we can see for this specific image here that we have, there's a whole bunch of security findings, right? And their severity is high, medium, low. So straight away, if you were to move, Jay, your container images from wherever you're storing them into Azure Container Registry, you could turn this on straight away and have your images scanned for security vulnerabilities, like right away. So that already enhances the security posture of your environment, right? Because you can start understanding whether those images are safe and secure.
Gotcha.
Or not. So we can also go back to our inventory here and look at all of our resources. I should have some Kubernetes clusters in here we can search. So, and you can see here, if I've just gone to my inventory here, so this is listing all of my inventory and what's being monitored inside my particular Azure subscription. That's worth noting actually at this point that I'm just looking at one specific Azure subscription. But what you can actually do here is you can actually filter your subscriptions here, and I can select a whole bunch of subscriptions. So you see I have a whole ton of Azure subscriptions and accounts here. I can select a bunch of these and then actually correlate all of my security information into one single pane of glass here where I can look at the security posture across multiple subscriptions if your company or organization has that. But if we go back to Kubernetes here, you can see that actually I've got this one here, AESC AKS Cloud Talk. So I can click into that specific resource in Security Center. And I can see that there's 15 total security recommendations for me to take action on inside this, this resource. And then you can just see the list of those recommendations once it loads. That's strange it's taken that long. Let's hit back. Aha, spoke too soon. So yeah, so you can see here that these are a bunch of recommendations on my Azure Community Service that I can improve, right? So this example here says that, we can make this bigger, authorized IP ranges should be defined on our Kubernetes service, right? The other thing we can have is server situation on allowed ports only, right? And these are, again, affected by a high, medium, or low priority. But if we click on this one, which is another cool feature of Security Center that's really going to help us out, is if we click into this, it will tell us what the description is. So say you restrict access to the Kubernetes Service Management API by granting API access only to IP address in specific ranges, yada, yada, yada. But we get the remediation steps here. And you can do this quick fix remediation, right? So we can just do... oh, excuse me.
Mm-hmm.
If we just go back to that, sorry.
I wanted to go to this guy. Here we go.
Yeah, we can just click quick fix, and it's going to go ahead and give us the opportunity to do a quick fix for this thing, right? So we can like literally, what it does is it will run a remediation script to go and remediate that for us. And we can go and quickly fix this resource. So it's like super easy to go and fix some of these things, like right out the box. If we don't have a quick fix available, you can go into one of these vulnerabilities and you can look at the manual remediation here. It will tell you exactly here how to go ahead and fix these security issues in your cluster. Okay. So loads of information here, like specifically around Kubernetes and the Azure Kubernetes Service to give us insight into the security of our cluster. There's some other stuff you could probably do, Jay, which isn't going to pick up here, unfortunately, which is more from like an AppSec perspective, right? And I think you've spoke about Key Vault on the show before, but you should be storing your secrets. If you have a database that's storing your products for your shop, right, you should store in those secrets in a secure vault. All right, you should be using, you should be accessing them using managed service identity, so that with Key Vault we have this chicken and egg situation, right? You put your keys in a vault, but then you need a key to access the vault, right? So it's like, where do we keep the key to access the vault that stores the keys? So managed service identity is a feature in Azure that we can do where our underlying instance or our container or our virtual machine or our app service assumes an identity that has permission to go and access the keys. So you don't have to have any keys stored in your code at all. It's a small service that runs on the underlying instance that enables us to do that. Mm-hmm. So what that means is that we can securely access our keys without storing any of our secrets or any secrets at all in our code, in plain text anywhere, or as application settings or anything like that. So that's another thing, like for a simple app like yours, Jay, that you can think about, right?
So here's a question for me. We go through this policy here at Microsoft, which I think is really interesting. We have a Security Center that we use, and it's part of everything that we do as a team. As advocates, Security Center is really a huge way that they make sure that all the demos we build, all the projects we use are secure. And so one of the things I really like are the ability to make sure that there are policies set. And I think about this from a very, very simple network security, and we can go really, really simple level here of someone puts up a whole bunch of Windows and Linux servers, and they leave 21 and RDP ports open, or I should say 22 and the RDP ports open.
Yep.
That is like one of the most common nightmares that starts the bigger problem that I know of in my career are people who put servers online and just go, whoa, okay, and forget about the fact that port scans happen very, very often. That, you know, there are bots constantly trying to own servers all day long. I used to clean them up for a living.
Oh yeah, they're out there.
And it's even more common now in the cloud because huge IP address blocks associated to cloud providers are now out in the wild. People know what they are, and it's real easy to set up just a series of scans and look for open ports. And what is the name of that? Like, is it Shadowon or whatever that or something?
Shodan, yeah,
Shodan. That index of all those different servers that people can find all over the world that are just open. And if I'm right, didn't like Tesla end up getting outed from that site because all their Kubernetes servers ended up being open?
They may have done, but there's been so many things like that. There was someone who there was like Redis that was open with no password to the internet once, that I like the Redis cache that I saw somebody found on Shodan or something, and then was able to exploit and get all the data breach out of it. There's a premium tier as well. A lot of ethical hackers actually pay for the Shodan premium tier to get more insights for the clients that they're actually like bug bounty hunters and stuff like that. But like, that's just one service that's out there. That there's also, like you say, a bunch of people just running Nmap scans, scanning for open ports, right?
So that's just like, it was just a common problem that I just remember forever. And so it's always fun to see that like something like Security Center that we use at Microsoft as a team will say, okay, if you're putting a server into the wild, if it doesn't meet certain criteria, then it will not work. We will not allow you to launch it. And I think that, these are the policies that you really kind of have to sometimes put in place when you're not dealing with just a couple of people. When you're talking about massive, even at a couple of people, you should be putting these things. But once you get into people putting into huge environments and it's getting more and more complex, being able to say, if you want to launch servers, they all have to have RDP closed. They all have to have, SSH closed. If you build a Kubernetes server, you need to know that like that public facing control panel, it needs to be closed. Stuff like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. So there's a couple of steps to that. So the first thing is using something like Azure Policy, right? Which I'm not going to show right now, but Azure Policy gives us the ability to define a policy, and then at resource creation time, like it won't even let us create those network security groups that allow those management ports, right? So that's like numero uno, right? That's like block it before it happens, right? That's awesome. But what Security Center will give us is, it will give us the ability it will recommend when we're not doing those things right. So it will, we have this regulatory compliance thing that you can see on the screen now, and this will tell us how well we comply to some industry standards, including our Azure Security Baseline, by the way, here, which is a new thing that we just launched, which is a baseline that we've defined, a benchmark, that we've defined for good security in Azure, and we'll tell you in Security Center how you're performing against that security benchmark, which includes things like open management ports. But you can also add your own compliance policies in here as well. If your company or organization has written its own compliance policy, you can actually see here how you're performing against that as well. But actually, you'll get recommendations straight away for open management ports. I can imagine that there's, if I go back to our overview, we go into our secure score, which is basically telling us that we've got 74% secure. We can go into here and we can click into this particular subscription, and it will start telling us things we can do to get more points for our score. So this is like gamifying, securing up your Azure subscription. But I can imagine that in here, here we go. Restrict unauthorized network access, right?
Okay, I'm gonna focus in for everybody there.
Yeah, cool. I can try and make it a bit bigger, but we might.
No. I just wanted to make sure this was the focus. They don't need to see our heads floating.
So right here, right, in this restrict unauthorized network access, right, exactly what you're talking about, Jay. Internet-facing virtual machines should be protected with network security groups, right? So we have 100% compliance with this, right? But it's telling you here, right, that you should have that. If we go back to those recommendations, we can see here that we have some vulnerable, we saw this earlier, the Kubernetes service, right, only allowing authorized IP addresses. All network ports should be restricted, all right? So this is some of our network security inbound rules are too permissive. So this is looking at any rule to allow any or internet ranges in. So just letting everybody into our VM. So this is something that unless it's probably HTTP, right, or HTTPS, then we probably shouldn't be doing, depending on what service that is running. You can see I've got 24 healthy resources here, but I have 5 resources which are unhealthy, and I can dive into these and starting to identify what these rules are and start fixing them. Right, so we're actually allowing like any source to any destination inbound. So I imagine, this is the client. Sorry, where are we? So we're allowing, so we're allowing like any to any here on an allow rule, right? So this is what it's identifying as the problem. So this is a way for us to come in and see some of our security recommendations. Now, the thing that I will say is that this is great, right? Obviously, this is brilliant, right? We shouldn't allow management ports, and all these things will be identified here. But there's 2 things here. We shouldn't allow management ports, like, period, right? So we shouldn't be accessing our resources over the internet on port 3389 for RDP or 22 for SSH, like, anyway. But sometimes we've got to administer our environments, right? Sometimes we've got to log on. And you and I come from a DevOps space, so we're probably going to say everything should be immutable, right? You should rerun your build and rebuild your entire server or your system when you do a change, right? But the reality is that a lot of people are still remotely accessing their environments. So there's a couple of ways that we can do that in Security Center, which I think is really neat. So one thing that we can do is we can use something called just-in-time access. So I'll show you that here in Security Center. It comes under Azure Defender here, and we'll talk about some of the Azure Defender gives us a bit of the more advanced threat protection and looking for more kind of attacks happening to our environment rather than looking for configuration changes. But it does do some extra stuff in the advanced protection section at the bottom here, right? So the advanced protection includes that container image scanning we spoke about earlier. But one of the other things is this just-in-time virtual machine access. So you can see here that I've got all these virtual machines configured for just-in-time access. And what just-in-time access means is I need access to this virtual machine and I need management port access, but I don't want to open it the whole time, right? So I don't know, it's the middle of the night, something's gone wrong. Jay's like, damn, I need to RDP into this Windows server or SSH into my Ubuntu machine. You can go into just-in-time access and you can go ahead and you can request access. So for this specific virtual machine, I can go and request access, and you can see that I can toggle that on. I can say that I want it just from my IP right now or from a particular range. So I can say my IP and I can check the range. So I can have 1, 2, or 3 hours worth of access. All of these ports that are allowed and the time period that's allowed is all configured when you enable the virtual machine for just-in-time access. Gotcha. So you can choose to allow it for 5 hours, 1 hour, just port 22, like whatever.
I know. I always play around when I use that when I need access with Bastion, but not everyone can always have Bastion due to certain reasons. So I guess being able to set up these kind of rules for just momentary access is really useful.
Yeah, exactly, and that was kind of where I was kind of we'll talk about Bastion. I think that's kind of the evolution of this, right? So
absolutely.
So here is like our enter request justification, right? So you don't have to put a justification in, but you can put a justification in and then open the ports. So yeah, this opens the ports for 3 hours. But what's the other thing that's good about this, right? It's audited. It creates an audit log in the Azure activity log, right? So now I know that Jay went and opened port 22 on this server at 1 a.m. in the morning, right? And then if I'm doing SecOps and I'm using Sentinel, and we'll talk a bit about SecOps in a while, then I might have analytics rules that look for weird correlations, like why is Jay logging opening SSH on a server at 1 a.m. in the morning his time, right? That seems odd, or that seems out of the ordinary, right? And start doing like some correlating different sources of data. But I can't do that unless I've got this log entry, right, to know that you opened that port at that time and that's what you did. So the audit trail here is super powerful.
Nice. Because it's funny. I was talking with Pierre last week. Oops, that was loud. I don't know why it was that loud. I had that turned off. Anyhow, I was talking to Pierre last week about how important auditing is. especially when you're using secrets. And we kind of like really keyed in on that for a few minutes, because I thought that, when you come from, like, I guess a DevOps or an Ops, I'm a sysadmin by trade. That's what I started at. I always felt that some sort of auditing was your only real true answer to the big, big things that sometimes you don't know how to answer. You know what I mean? Like, I felt like you can't really even consider where the answers are going to come from if you don't even know where the data is. And so I believe one of the cool things about being, understanding auditing and understanding how exactly it works to make sure that you're not necessarily missing who's not supposed to be using certain keys, who's not supposed to be accessing certain ports, or not even that, but if we have SSH on a bunch of machines or some sort of database connection that's coming from one server to another, that's not supposed to be coming from one server to another, and we can't figure out why there's so much traffic hitting the database, maybe there's configuration drift, something like that. Like, using auditing through security centers and stuff like that it's so important.
Yeah, man, like, log everything, right? Log it once, log it twice, like, get it somewhere where you can query it, where you can access it, where you can analyze it. But what I will say from a security perspective is that all of this stuff is like, all right, so retrospectively, like, this stuff might be really useful. Like, something happened at 1 a.m., right? Let's go and find that specific log, right? So that's maybe true, right? But all of these tools and logging all of this stuff is only useful if there's some element of proactivity involved, right? You need to proactively go into Security Center and check your recommendations, right? You need to turn on the alerts for Security Center, but turning them on isn't enough, right? You need to action them when they come through, right? Obviously, people, I won't mention any like vendors, but people buy like third-party vendor products all the time, and they put them in their cloud environment, right? I bought X intrusion detection system. I'm doing protective monitoring. I've got fully fledged SIEM solution with like all my logs going in, and it's like, yeah, but who's looking at it?
Yeah.
Who's looking at this stuff? Because if nobody's looking at it, then it's like it's no use to anyone, right? And that's evolved over the years, because we can now do automated orchestration and response to a lot of these events. So like, we're automatically doing a bunch, but you can't automate everything, right? You need to come and look at some of this stuff as well.
Yeah, sometimes you got to do some good old-fashioned analysis of the data that you see, and then come up with a little bit of us said greppers, if you will, SecOp greppers. We've spent our years using things like SecOp, grep, sort, unique things, all these tools to find all this information, where like stuff from TCP dump comes in, and finding, where is that network packet coming? Like, why is it? These are the things we really don't have to do anymore, thanks to a lot of the tooling. You know what I mean? And
exactly. But it's so true, and it's like the tough thing about security is, and it's hard, and this is why you need to kind of like, you can automate whatever you want. And my point there around like having to do stuff mainly is that, like, think about it like this, right? As an attacker, they just need to find one gap in your environment to get in, right? They just need to do a couple of things to get in, right? But as the person defending from the attackers, right, you got to defend the whole thing and cater for all possibilities, right? Because you don't know what way they're going to come in and what they're going to do. So we're always outnumbered, right? When it comes when we're defending our environments. So we need to be smart about it, right? So we need to automate where we can. We need to use tooling to help us identify our low-hanging fruit, and then that gives us the means that the manual stuff we're doing is really, really valuable, right? And I think that's the key, is like using the tooling to help us spend our time on more value-add enhancements that we can make to our environments.
Absolutely. So let's take a look at this a little bit more. So now you can enter a justification specifically.
Yeah, so I can just say like server is dead or something, right? And then like, all right, there we go. So I don't actually have authorization in this particular subscription, right? So, and again, here we go. We're using RBAC, right? We're role-based access control here to limit who can do specific actions. So I don't actually, I mean, this is a demo environment that I don't actually own. It's owned by the Security Center team. So they probably don't trust me to go around SSHing into their virtual machine. So I probably have user permissions as opposed to contributor or whatever, or reader permissions. So yeah, I can't do that. So we can't go ahead and hit open, but it will still, I believe this will still log here that somebody has attempted to open the ports.
Got it.
But the point here is, Jay, you mentioned it, you hit the nail on the head, that to do this, right, we still need a public IP for our virtual machine, right? Because we've still got to SSH to a public IP. We're still opening access to the internet, right? Okay, only from my IP for a few miles, or someone could go range here and just do like 10/8, like, do you know what I mean? Like 10.00/8 and just open it to, or more, or 8 or whatever, some kind of public range. But the point here is that we still have to open access to the internet. We still need a public IP address.
Hey,
now,
we got a question from Pierre.
Yeah, go.
Oh, a comment. This is very... Sorry, I just wanted to make sure, because it was nice to see Pierre show up. You can also, when you look at the data yourself, you can find false positives. And I think that's really important as well. Anyway, sorry, Dean, please continue.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Pierre, yeah. And I mean, Pierre knows his stuff, right? So, of course, it's a good point. So the point there was that you mentioned Azure Bastion, right, as a completely other service, right, to do some of this stuff. And Azure Bastion is still in preview, I believe, but it gives us a really cool ability to, like, if people are watching this and they're like, what's he talking about? What's a Bastion, right? You and I have been sysadmins in the past, right? This is just a term that we just use into, like, and we assume that everybody knows what it means, right? But a Bastion host is... When we used to deploy Bastion hosts on premises, it would be a host that management host, basically. You would log into it, and then from that environment, you would spawn connections out to other virtual machines inside your environment, right? It's a management host. So it meant that we didn't have to open access to the internet to these virtual machines. We would hop via our management host, or a Bastion host, as we would call it. And the security around the Bastion host would be pretty tight, but it would have the external access that we needed. So what Azure Bastion does is it gives us that ability, but as a managed service, which is pretty cool. So we can RDP into our Windows machines that are on a private network. We create an Azure Bastion service. We give it its own subnet inside of our VNet, and then we connect privately. Well, the service connects privately to a private IP address within our VNet to our virtual machines, and it presents via the Azure portal a web-based interface for you to interact with that particular service. So it's really nice, right? We get the way to, and I don't think I've got an Azure Bastion set up here to try it out and show you, but basically it's RDP in a browser, right? We can access our servers via the browser without having to have any public worrying about all this networking ports and all that kind of stuff.
So I wanted to talk about one other service, and maybe you can help me out a little bit more, but I'm going to do you something really, really cool first, Ian. I'm going to let you tell me about it before you tell me about it, if that's okay.
So what is Azure Sentinel? Azure Sentinel is a cloud-native SIEM, or Security Incident and Event Management Service, that runs in Azure. It basically means that we can start by having a number of data connectors that send our data into Sentinel. It's built on top of Azure Log Analytics workspaces for querying that data in a familiar way that you may be familiar with if you already use Log Analytics. But ultimately, we can get that data, we can start doing a number of things with it. We can start hunting through that data as a threat hunter or a SOC analyst to start to look for anomalies or bad actors within our environment. We can also have scheduled queries that run over that data to look for known bad activities and send us alerts when things such as brute force or particular CVEs arise. We can also then do security orchestration, automation and response by linking that into logic apps and having automated response to some of these security alerts. And then finally, what it helps us do is manage the whole incident process. We can have an incident management pane within Azure Sentinel to manage all of the alerts, assign them to people to look into and investigate, and ultimately mark them as resolved or comment, etc. So really what it gives you is the ability to have that SIEM feature running within the cloud without having to manage any infrastructure and get it set up. You simply just create a workspace, start putting the connectors in, and leverage some of the already existing queries or create your own to start analyzing and looking through your security event data.
I was still dancing there. So yeah, I love a good segue. I love a good segue. And so Azure Sentinel was, like, I thought, a really great place for us to kind of like spend the next few minutes as we kind of roll to the end, because it's a really, really just super useful product that I know I wanted to line you up with you because you already know so much about it. I thought it would be just a great idea.
You know, it's really cool, right? I was super stoked when this product got announced because, like, I've done SecOps in the past. I mentioned earlier that I did that for the Olympics, right? And like configuring the whole environment, like collecting all the logs, like making sure we have agents on all the virtual machines. I mean, they were virtual machines then, but they were like some of them were physical hosts back then. It wasn't the cloud, right? Then we had to set up like all of our monitoring. We used a company that we actually had our own products for the company I worked for. So we had to like implement it, set it up, right? And like the whole setup was a complete pain, to be honest, right? Whereas like Azure Sentinel, you can just go, oh, it's the cloud, right? So you can say, oh, hey, Azure, I'd like to do some SIEM, right? And then it will go and create a Sentinel environment for you in a handful of minutes. And then you can start connecting your different data connectors in and getting your data into that environment. Now, it doesn't happen overnight, right? Some of those resources are third-party resources, could be syslog that you want to get in. We support connectors for AWS and other cloud providers and third-party. So it's not as easy as just clicking a button for every single data connector, but you can get started with Azure Activity Log, the Azure Active Directory audit logs, and start pumping those in literally by just turning on the button to get that data into Sentinel.
So there must be like a really great kind of algorithm underneath for like anomaly detection based on some set of rules that you kind of create, I would imagine. So
yeah, there's kind of two things. There is, but you can also do what you can also kind of, you're in control of it, right? So as I mentioned in the video there that you saw, is that Azure Sentinel sits on top of log analytics. So log analytics is basically just a lake, basically.
Giant database, like it's a database of logs. Yeah.
So you're exactly right. So it's all of our logs, right? And then for years, actually, before Sentinel, we've been able to query that using a language called Custo Query Language, or KQL.
KQL. Yep.
Which is a SQL-like-ish kind of query language to query that log data. It's super powerful. It allows us to query the data, present it back as graphs, etc. So, like for example, like this is Sentinel here. And all of these like widgets on the dashboard here, they're just KQL queries under the hood that's querying our data and presenting it here. So if we look at some of the analytics here in Sentinel, we have the one stat that I can never kind of get my head around is that Microsoft spends like $1 billion a year or something on cybersecurity, right? So we have a whole army of cybersecurity professionals that are helping our customers, right? So they're writing queries that we're using internally. They're writing queries for our customers. The Sentinel product group are writing queries for people to run across their data. So we provide a bunch of rules out of the box here. There's a whole ton of rule templates here that you can pick, right? So, I mean, take your pick, right? What do we got here? Like client. Oh, here we go. Security event log has been cleared, right? So it tells you here that this is a medium severity. This is the name of the analytic rule. It's a scheduled rule, so it's something that we run on a timer. It tells you here that if you want to have this rule, you need to have the security events data source enabled. And then the other thing that's pretty cool is here, it tells you the tactics. So we map all of these analytics rules to the MITRE attack framework. So anybody working in cybersecurity or most people in cybersecurity will be familiar with the MITRE attack framework that classifies the different tactics an attacker might use. And here it's defense evasion. So it tells you a description. So it's looking for the event ID 1102, which indicates the security log was cleared. And it's looking at our Windows event log from our machines to do this, right? But what you can do here is you can see that all it is a query, right? I don't know if I can make this any bigger. Probably can, maybe. But it's a bit small in the box, sorry. But basically, we're just looking at a query. We're saying, look at the security event log table where the time generated is the specific time frame. We're looking for the event ID 1102. And then we're going to summarize that and then present that data back, right? And then we can go ahead and we can actually create this rule. Again, I don't have the permission in this subscription to do that, but if it's your subscription, you can go ahead and create that rule and then decide what schedule you want to run that rule on, and then we'll start getting alerts for that rule. So somebody in Microsoft has wrote this rule and made it available to you. And there's a whole ton of these here, right, for different attacks, right? So you can turn the ones on that you want. But on the same note, you can just go and write your own custom KQL, right? So SOC analysts will learn the KQL language very well. and they'll go and build them. And we have the whole community of people of open source developers on GitHub creating queries and analytic rules that people can run on their environment. So it's really cool. Basically, everything sits on log analytics and KQL, and Sentinel just presents it in a really, really nice way.
Yeah, it helps you kind of identify the things that you normally, like I said, you would have to start going through logs and doing some more searching the way we good old-fashioned sysadmins and people that eventually went into InfoSec that you would have to do. You'd have to spend time really learning your grep. And it's really nice to see that the ways to kind of look at these types of things, how they happen, and make a decision on how to rectify the problems. That's really cool, because I just remember looking for port scanning IPs and then having to throw them on the firewall on the fly. You know what I mean?
So, well, this is interesting. So in that specific example here, like we could potentially, we could get like a feed here, like a threat intelligence feed or something that told us about potentially malicious IPs or scanners or whatever, right? And then we can query the log for those IPs, and then we can query all the other logs to see if we've had any inbound requests from those IPs, right? And we can start seeing where they've gone. And then if we were to get any issues, we can actually trigger what are called playbooks. So we can do an automated response, which uses a service called Azure Logic Apps, which is a serverless automated workflow. You actually don't need to write any code. You can do this all graphically.
Yeah, I love them. I'm going to do a show on Logic Apps one of these days.
Oh, you should.
Yeah,
so cool.
They're fun.
Yeah, and I mean, like, so basically any of these alerts trigger, so you could write your own alert here, right, for that specific thing, or there may already be one for all we know. And then you could, once that alert triggers, rather than it create an incident or rather than it go ahead and let Jay know that that's happened, you can have it trigger a Logic app and just go and update that firewall rule or in like the NSG rule for you automatically, all within Sentinel.
That's exactly what I think we want from an automating process standpoint nowadays. I think it's really important to be able to interconnect these tools so that you can actually automate responses. Also, like, send out notifications, being able to make determinations on what next steps are. Because it's really easy to fix a problem with a hammer, but if you find out you don't really need a hammer, you just need a screwdriver, it sometimes it makes a lot more sense. And I think this gives you a lot more places to tighten the screws or loosen them based on the problem. And so I love tools like this because I look at them almost the way I look at real physical tools. And so we're gaining so much by using things like this because, we don't have to use the entire toolbox anymore. And that was what I felt the way a lot of early security work was, even in the cloud. You needed an entire toolbox to be able to figure out how to protect things and how to mitigate the problems. And nowadays, that toolbox is now just a couple of tools that you can bring along the way. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think it's really cool. And there's two things mentioned on Sentinel. I know we don't have time to dive into Sentinel as much as we'd love to, but you mentioned earlier about some of the advanced analytics stuff, right? You see here this rule here, it says Fusion next to it. Fusion is using Azure machine learning under the hood to run machine learning algorithms to look at a more advanced kind of kill chain attacks, like very multi-stage. This one here is multi-stage attack across a kill chain. So it says here that 65 of the 70 are showing a combination of suspicious activity in Azure Active Directory followed by anomalous 365 activity. So something's happening, like someone's tried to break in and something weird has happened in 365, right?
Sure. So it could be like a script that's trying to hit an account and just throwing bad passwords, or maybe hitting an API that they're not supposed to be hitting, or something like that, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. Like this is here, like Azure Activity. So it could be like there's been like too many, failed sign-in attempts.
Yeah, like failed login attempts. Sure.
So like, right, there's a load of failed logins, and then there was a successful one, and then now there's like a massive data loss alert triggered for 365, right? Someone's downloading all your data, right? Like I'm laughing, like, because hopefully that doesn't happen. That's a serious situation if it does. But yeah, you get the point. So that's really, really cool here to give us like you're leveraging. You're standing on the shoulders of giants here around like leveraging some of the tools here that are available to us today. And yeah, these weren't available even when I started working in the cloud, like 2014. Like everything, like, none of this stuff was available then, and it was all like a lot of wrangling and doing it similar to the old way. And now this stuff's come on so well, man. Like, there's so much stuff in here that's so cool. Like, we can look at specific incidents. We can look at we can start investigating particular incidents and alerts. Like, there's so much stuff that we can do in here now.
And I really love this comment because it to me it explains exactly what it is we've been talking about. You know, that the tools and the brain behind this is just more capable than the brains we were given, and that makes a ton of sense. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like, exactly. It's so true. Like, we're not designed to kind of this, and it kind of helps us catch up with the attackers. So John Lambert, who's I think he's a fellow at Microsoft. He was like a very well-known Microsoft security guy. He had this quote that said, like, defenders think in lists and attackers think in graphs. And as long as that stays true, the attackers always win. All right. So I think that's a great quote, and it kind of shows that, yeah, this kind of helps us think in graphs, right? Because the computer's doing it for us, and it's more intelligent than we can be as defenders.
Very cool. So why don't we start wrapping up, man? Why don't we start taking this all the way to the end? What do you think?
Yeah, it's nearly on the hour.
Yeah, and I think we really got some cool, information here. I think that you've really helped me out with some of these big idea tools that Azure comes with, that for the most part, a lot of them aren't really big cost incurring right away. They're just about ingestion, and eventually when you customize them and have huge amounts of ingestion, that's where the costs kind of come into play. But a lot of these tools are there for you to start working and protect what you have on Azure.
Yeah, exactly. And like, both tools have a free tier. Azure Sentinel is actually free for particular log types. It changed recently because we were offering some for free in the preview, but like your Azure activity logs, for example, are always free in Sentinel. So there's some free stuff that we can kind of have. But you can get value from all these tools for absolutely nothing, right? If you're leveraging Azure, which is really, really cool. And yeah, I think, like, there's so much stuff, right? We said this at the beginning, right? There's so many different tools. So I think, like, to understand your security posture, like, go ahead and look at Azure Security Center, right? That's a good place to start. Check your secure score, your recommendations. It's a great place to get going. And if you want to do more kind of security operations on your environments, check out Azure Sentinel. I think those two tools are really good, like, large tools that cover a lot of the bases for us without looking at nitty-picky kind of things that we can change in our environments.
And like you said, they also can work in combination with things like Azure Policy, which I already talked with Steve from our team, and I'm like, maybe we need to sit down and just talk about Azure Policy, because there's a lot. You look at that AZ-104, and you can't pass the AZ-104 test without knowing a good amount of policy. And I like incorporating a lot of that 104 into what we do here, because 900 is a great amount of information to learn. 900 is really in depth around all these kind of subjects. But then once you start going into AZ-104, you start seeing where security, where policies, Active Directory, how Azure Active Directory, all these things kind of come together to not just give you a place to deploy, but to protect what you have.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I can't agree more.
Cool. Well, hey, thank you so much for joining me today, Dean. I'm honored to work alongside you day to day, but the fact that you gave me what is later in the evening out in the UK, some of your time, I really do appreciate it, because for me it's middle of the afternoon. I'm gonna go walk my dog in the cold and in the sunshine, and I know you got people to take care of and things to do, so thanks so much for your time.
No, man, it's been a blast. Thanks for having me.
Yep, we'll do this sometime again. Thanks again. Take care.
Cheers.
Ooh. And there's, hey, thank you very much, Pierre. Appreciate it. That was fun. I always say one of my favorite things about doing this all the time is just doing it with the people that I really appreciate, and the ones that just know how to get all these really cool things on Azure going. So until next time, it's your old pal Jay, We're going to have a good time, and we're going to do this again soon. We'll see about what's going on with the Thanksgiving holiday. It is what it is. Catch you next time.